Thank you for the opportunity. I am very happy to be here, not only because of the audience and the fullness of the house, it's always wonderful to speak to a full house, but also because I like to test everything we're doing in different cultures and different perspectives. So consider yourselves also a test today. And my presentation obviously is going to be a positive attitude. I wouldn't have been invited if I was coming here to complain, because I think we all do that far too much. So what I would like to talk about is basically saying that the same way we'd say today that necessity is the mother of invention, I'm thinking on the lines of maybe the crisis is the mother of innovation. And this is a little bit the setting of our conference, or my talk today. This lady, called Hilde Holger, is a Viennese. She moved to Mumbai, for many years during the tough period in Europe, and she was my dance teacher in her late 80s in London. That's where I met her. And that's where I studied, but I didn't study dance, but I was doing dance. And so she's wonderful, and I'm hoping to see a little bit of her photography in your museums tomorrow, because we have a bank holiday in Portugal tomorrow. What's our context? Our context is, I think, yesterday I was in a conference as well in Cascais, near Lisbon, about Glocal. The theme was Glocal, the Glocal initiative, which is very much what we're talking about when we're talking about social entrepreneurship. And the Secretary of State of our country came and made a speech which was exactly this slide. He didn't use slides, but it was exactly this slide. And I only put this slide like this in at the beginning because I actually don't want to read it, but I want just us to understand that everything that we have as a constraint or as a threat presented to us is also an opportunity. And I can, with just very quickly, 2 slides which are coming next, show you how I think we really have opportunities. We really have to make a big step to get out of this vision that is, oh, we are going to be too many on the planet, we're not going to have food for everyone, we're getting too old, what are the threats? Energy, energy is going to finish, there's no more material on the earth. I mean, this is really what we were put on this planet for, I think, to actually look beyond the limitations, work with them, and make a better world. And I think this is our role. So we saw on that slide hunger and poverty. Perhaps food for all is one of our drivers. We saw on that slide old age's vulnerability, because I saw this at the airport a week ago, one of those nice statements you see some banks actually putting on these posters in Heathrow Airport, and it was saying 2/3 of 65-year-olds, actually I can look at it, I can read it, it's simpler, 2/3 of people who ever reached 65 are alive today. It's quite incredible. But again, I don't think that's a threat. I think we need to have environments that are actually friendly for old age, and our cities are not, but we can get there. Then we have chronic disease, which is taking like one in every 2 people in the US, as far as I know, have got some form of chronic disease. Why not have health as one of our ambitions, and maybe cut out a few things that we like, but replace them with better things, sugar, gluten, etc. We have the threat, let's say, that's how it's presented to us, of high energy consumption, natural resource depletion, low air quality in our cities, bad sanitation, noise levels that are unbearable, discomfort, social unrest. But we have a lot of challenges here. Okay, we're a lot of people living together. We don't want to live like 200 years ago, 100 years ago, because we are actually very demanding. But then let's make sure that we can have that collectively and individually, not just individually. So how can we do better? And I think that perhaps one of the most important steps that we've made over the last 20 years, perhaps since Rio, but maybe even more since the Brundtland philosophy entering our model, our social model and our economic model, maybe what we've understood is that we have to take into consideration the 3 pillars of sustainability. And these 3 pillars, social, economical, and environmental, these 3 pillars have had a lot to give us and to become part of our decision-making processes, especially if we have as our main aim the end user, the person who's actually afterwards, after we design and we've finished and we put something in the market, the person that is using it, whether it's a house or a chair, the people who are actually living with what we create. And when we're looking at urban planning, this is the first statement. I don't know if you can read it. It's a little bit faint and far away. I'm sorry. But when we're looking at urban planning, one of the things that Professor Klastam from Sweden says is, you want to do a sustainable environment, it has to be even more attractive than the non-sustainable environments. And Lia Vasconcelos was a Portuguese specialist on governance, but with the collective and inclusive dimensions very strongly expressed. She says, if people don't co-own situations, they will never defend them, and those situations won't last. So when we have these realities, which actually I'm very happy to see that the good bee is dealing with, when we have these realities, and in Portugal we have 1,200 of such people, of which I think something like 700 have no bed at night. There is a few beds, but some don't get the bed. Maybe we could have this situation. We have really we can use the same park bench for the same purpose, but perhaps not because we have to, perhaps because we can. And these are the switches, the changes that we have to bring into our society, in my view. A lot of it has to start with voluntary involvement, and there is a lot of that going on in our society. And one of the renewable resources that I very much like to speak about and to work with is this dimension of people doing what they believe. And if they believe in something and it's not happening, then let's work towards it. The environmental dimension, big challenge, because it was completely not in our mind frame, it was not in our decision-making process, and now it has to be, and it has to be in every little decision every day. Even our decisions of whether we take the bus, we go on foot, or whether we take a bike, or whether we take a car. So there are decisions that touch us very intimately, and therefore they're not so easy to take. But we've had to accept that the world is a finite system. We've had to accept that what we do with the resources has to be dealt with very carefully. Professor Carl-Henrik Robert from the Natural Step, he says that it's not enough to minimize the use of resources. We actually have to make sure that we increase the capacity of the world, of the planet, to regenerate itself. So this is an important role. Then we have people like Michael Braungart and cradle-to-cradle principle, who are a little bit daring and perhaps dangerous in as much as they say, no, as long as the industry sorts itself out and only does upcycling, we can consume, we can do whatever we want to do. I don't know, but my feeling is the truth lies somewhere between these very important gurus we have in our society in this time. And certainly let's say, our challenge in everyday decision-making is to make sure we satisfy all three of these. Take them into consideration. I'm showing you something you definitely know is the 32-second chair of Michael Braungart, which is, well, we have to look at the whole cycle of our products. We can't look at just the result, the beautiful-looking chair that's in our living room. We have to look at the whole life cycle. And the whole life cycle, in the case of this chair, for example, means that you have to think of the moment when it gets deconstructed, how quick it is. Because I know my computer is a beautiful design, but I know that I'm sure it will end up in Laos somewhere, sitting on a pile, and the toxins that are incorporated in it will leak gradually into our ocean. It takes 100 years for any poison to reach the ocean. If you don't know that, you know it now. So this idea of looking at repairing, at reusing, at bringing things back into as a raw material, and this idea that there is no waste and that we don't have space for waste. Come on, we have so little space on the planet to do everything we need to do with it. Why waste space with waste, you know? So these challenges also need to be taken into account, and funnily enough, every decision we make goes somewhere along those lines. It has to go. Either it creates a problem for these principles, or it actually resolves it. When we're looking at economy, and believe me, I'm the worst person to talk about economy, but probably because I don't know so much about it, I'm great because I can see it from the outside. My wish for economy, if I could have a wish, is that it would be in a sense, harmonious with our planet. So if we have a very artificial economical system, which sometimes explodes here and there, you know, these events are quite exciting for many of us. Maybe if we have such an artificial system and we were so intelligent to build it up, maybe it can be even more intelligent and make it actually harmonious with our planet. So why does it have to actually be set up on growth? If the planet doesn't grow, why does our financial system have to grow? And if we can't change that because it has to grow, well, then at least let's grow on what we're allowed to grow with. What are we allowed to grow with? Renewable resources, perhaps, because the finite ones are the ones that we're supposed to take care of for next generations to be able to use. So this concept of renewable prosperity, which we launched the end of last year, we're working with it this year, is basically an urban model that relies on growth only in the renewable dimension. But the renewable is not just the sun energy that we know about, the wind energy and so on. The renewable is also materials. When we looked at the example that was shown by the good bee, we saw that you actually can upcycle materials when they go through our industrial processes. And we have free will. People who actually had problems, they can be the labor, they can be reintegrated in society, and so on. So we can be doing various good things at the same time. One example of this renewable prosperity concept is that we can have renewable energy supplying our cities. We can use them locally. Those energies that we're not using locally and immediately, they can go to the grid. If the grid doesn't have a use for them, from our building where we produced it, our PV's panel or the wind turbine near us, then that grid will be able to either distribute it to other users that need it or to electrical vehicles that can store it. Now, the intelligence we need in the vehicles, the intelligence we need in the grids is not technologically enough developed yet, and it's not yet in the market. Sorry, technologically it's already pretty much developed, but it's not in the market yet. So we will take time to get here. But if we can make these flows decentralized and very much based on renewables, we can have cities that are very autonomous. Of course, when I'm talking about my country, which probably has less than 20 times less use of renewable energies, or we have double as many hours of sun and so on than yours, and I'm very embarrassed to admit this. The truth is that the potential is there, and it needs probably help from all over, from your experience, for us to be able to succeed. And perhaps we can bring you also some added value. One of the biggest challenges our cities face at the moment is resilience. I don't know how much you've heard the terminology. It's now the third year that there actually is a congress in Bonn about this topic of urban resilience. Resilience basically means when a city gets slapped, it can go back on its feet quickly. And I know in Europe we have, in the last 100 years, still a live memory of what it is to get back on our feet after big slaps. We in Portugal, the last time we had a big slap was 1755 with a colossal earthquake, which really made our lower areas totally tabula rasa. So 100 years later, which is the span of a memory, by the way, collective memory, we forgot about it and we started building very badly. So our buildings are terrible. In any case, resilience. Resilience, if we look at resilience in our cities, we need to have courage to say no to a lot of things that we know are wrong. I'm giving you a list here. I'm sure you can read this one. This one is written quite big. So we've developed a set of values connected with resilience. We think that the values are important not because we are moralistic or because we think we should tell top down what is right, just because we think that people identify with these values. And if they identify with them, when we are going to communicate ideas or market products, we need to understand the language, the actual connection we have with the user, with the end user. So this set of values, which is basically identity, collaboration, flexibility, was mentioned here today, diversity, because we need to be stimulated, redundancy, because we need actually, like when we had the big earthquake in Lisbon, the lower areas got completely destroyed. So those people had to go somewhere, there were survivors, to survive for the next few days until they had help. So building redundancy into infrastructure in the areas which won't get destroyed by an earthquake is very relevant, because then the 4 days, which is normally what it takes to get help from outside, you can actually make that population that survived actually survive. You know, Haiti, most people that died well after the earthquake. They didn't die during the earthquake. So managing redundancy is very important, although we are all about efficiency, as you know. But redundancy has a big role in resilient cities. Then decentralization, the more you have transformation of, for example, renewable energies or renewable rainwater into usable water, the more decentralized these systems are, also the more likely it is that they will survive and offer some autonomy for a longer period if the city is put under a lot of stress, no matter whether the stress is climate stress, climate change stress, or whether it is, as I was explaining, the earthquake in Lisbon. And autonomy. Autonomy is not something we want to look at on the building scale. It's a very bad idea for a building to be autonomous, I think, but it's a very good idea for groups of buildings to have some autonomy, because you give and take, and you create communities, and you make these communities interact and know that they need each other and know that they actually can contribute to each other. Very, very out of the context, but important example. In Portugal, we have a rule in urban planning where we are obliged to separate buildings the same distance as they are high. This is the 45-degree angle rule. It's bullshit. It doesn't bring any added value. We want rules for urban planning which are to do with values that we care about. And for example, a value that I care about is that I can actually have sunshine in my apartment during all year. So we've created new rules like this one that I'm showing you, which is the 28-degree angle is our solar angle in winter, in the 21st of December. So the lowest angle we get of sun. You get a little bit lower here. This angle, I need to make sure that it reaches my apartment. So if I want to make a calculation of a distance of a south-facing facade, I need to make sure that at midday, on the 21st of December, if it's sunny, I get some sunlight into my apartment. Now, ensuring sun hours in an apartment, isn't that a much nicer rule to have in urban planning than, for example, 45-degree angle? I don't know. You can tell me afterwards. We had a wonderful project done in the center of the city that was totally rebuilt after that 1755 earthquake. And this plan, you don't imagine the people we have to deal with when we're talking about urban planning in Lisbon. We're talking about people who think every building is sacred. And it was very good that we managed to put this through. But the urban plan that is about refurbishing the center of the city actually has a map in it, which is this map, which actually tells you the solar potential. So today, all we had the courage was to say how much solar potential is there. But tomorrow, maybe some of our politicians, local politicians, will have the courage to say, you want to refurbish that urban block? Okay, make sure the solar potential is implemented. So this is just to tell you that even historical centers can start to open the way to innovation, to bringing the dimension of sustainability in whichever way we manage. Then we have another level at which we've developed a set of values. And again, I say we must have the courage with every vote, with every decision we make, to say no to the things that don't make sense. It doesn't make sense to have unfunctional space. It doesn't make sense to have low resource efficiency. It doesn't make sense to have untransparent or insufficient information, and so on. And we don't want waste. We don't want obesity. We don't want barriers. We don't want unhealthy indoor environments. So we designed another set of values that we think are to do with the scale of the building as opposed to the scale of the city, which was the previous ones I showed you, which go from, we want robust solutions, solutions that last, solutions that are efficient, that allow us to understand what our input is, our impact is every moment that we're using the building. We need to know, we need to monitor. We have to have sensors that tell us what we are having in terms of environment and so on. We need to have effective solutions that allow us to function, intelligent because they use renewable resources whenever available, prepared because they store for moments that they don't have, and we need to be connected in networks so that we don't waste. So just one quick example. This is a building I designed in the mid-90s. It's one of the reference buildings. It's actually squashed the image, I'm sorry. It's one of the reference buildings in green, let's say, construction in the 90s. And basically, the two images you see on the right show you the temperature readings outdoor So when you look at these dots, these are the every hour temperature readings outdoor. This is the comfort polygon, which is in relation of human humidity, is relative humidity and temperature, dry bulb temperature. And this same polygon is here. And these are the temperature readings indoor. There's not one bit of heating used, and this is January, the whole month of January of 2001, which was when we did the first monitoring of the building. So with the building envelope, you can basically bring to the indoor environment the best of the climate, as long as you design, taking into consideration how materials relate and react to the climate. Obviously, I'm not telling you to do this here, and if I put this building here, it won't work. It works where it is. And this is, again, another big mistake we did in Europe, which was to import images that we thought were nice, and we put them in other climates where they don't work. We have these enormous glass buildings of the 80s, 90s, power symbols that are total sinks for money, for everything disappears in them. Whatever you're doing to them, they're not comfortable, and they're not good for us, and they don't allow us to have high productivity, creativity. But we had to copy the other people doing trendy things. Another aspect which I wanted to briefly talk to you about, and I'm nearly finished, is flexibility and how buildings need to adapt to the end user's needs. We want to live in a building probably all our life if we like it, or in a house all our life. And very often we find that at a certain age, when we start having certain problems, we can't stay in that house. Why? Perhaps in the lifetime of a house or of a flat, there will be 10% of the time that the people that live in it don't have the same mobility as they had when they moved in or when they bought it. And maybe we should take care of that aspect. Maybe we should integrate that in our design. Another thing is, who would have said 50 years ago that now, well, I wouldn't have known it. 50 years ago, I was more or less being born. But in any case, I wouldn't have known that I was going to be working from home 70% of my time, 50% of my time. So my home has to be designed so that I can work from it well. And all these innovation, this innovation that comes as a challenge from the evolution of our society, of our technology, is extremely important to incorporate. So buildings need to be flexible. And what we found is that old buildings are very flexible when it comes to housing buildings being changed into other uses. But if we look at our office buildings of the last 30 years and we try and change their use, it's very difficult. So this is just an example of a small office, home office, how a wall can turn into an office. This is an example of a space that goes between a kitchen and a living area. Well, I always, in all the flats I design, I always have this feature, and some of the people who buy the flats in the past, they've closed it. And I always say this is my feminist feature, because whoever is in the kitchen, and generally in Portugal, women are in the kitchen, maybe not always, but then at least they can have part of all the activity in the house without being the slave and the one who's being closed off. So there's always these openings. But openings also in small bedrooms, in one-bedroom flats, or small flats, openings between the living and the sleeping area. Why not? If we're not lacking in privacy because who is living there is a couple, why shouldn't we enjoy all the space at the same time? So another challenge that we need to take in, and very quickly, is refurbishment. Most of the buildings that we're going to have already exist. We have, for example, in Lisbon, almost 1/3, I think, of our built environment in Lisbon is derelict or is not being used. We need to do something with what we've got, because it's a precious resource. It can be adapted. And we did a lot of work with the Sustainable Construction Living Lab. It's a group created, an open group created, bringing around a table all the actors that are relevant in the construction sector. And they've never talked to each other, generally. The blinds people don't know that the window people have a certain problem that they could be resolving without even knowing it. The insulation people don't like the blinds people to fix the blinds through the insulation because it creates impermeabilization problems. So bringing them around the table, you can come with a lot of good solutions. Innovation is almost inevitable. But responsive buildings is what I was talking about when I told you can't bring Torverd to Vienna. The responsive building is to understand how the building envelope can filter, reject, store, temper, admit, or redirect the climate that's outdoor. And this is a knowledge that you build up that our ancestors probably knew more about than we do today. So we want to minimize natural resources use, and we can do that with a lot of measures, from the renovation, from the innovation of renewable systems to very robust building envelopes. But the main message I would like to leave you today is that there is so much to do. There is so much to do that I don't believe that unemployment is a real word. I think it's a theoretical, it's an artificial concept. I think really we need a lot to do, and design is going to be critical in the next step of our development. Thank you very much. You want me to stay there?